Hi, Acadiana. I'm meteorologist Dave Baker, and hopefully you're having a great day here on this Thursday. It is a beautiful one once again with lots of sunshine out there and some pleasant temperatures. That humidity, though, has really dropped off, and you're going to look at some of these dew points that are pretty incredible here for South Louisiana. That dew point has dropped down to 27, so our humidity at 21%. It is extremely dry outside. Temperature, though, getting back to 68 degrees. I originally had a high of 67, had to move it up to 69 degrees. And again, a lot of this has to do with the drier air that's in place, and the wind is also kind of lightened up from yesterday, so we're not transporting as much cold air right now, but there's another front that's going to kind of blast through here later on tonight going into early tomorrow, and that's going to keep us cool and dry as we go into the latter part of the week and into the early part of the weekend. Look at those skies out there. Another beautiful day here in Acadiana with those blue skies and the sunshine out there. It's warm if you're in the sun, but it is a bit chilly if you're in the shade, but traffic obviously is moving along just fine. No worries there when it comes to weather. So I wanted to go back and take a look at Hurricane Debby. And Hurricane Debby was really something when it finally came into portions of Florida. Hurricane Debby was a slow-moving storm causing widespread flooding across the southeastern U.S., New England, and the Atlantic provinces of Canada. Now, Debby formed from a tropical wave back on July the 26th of this year and then continued to move on toward the northeast. It gained strength, becoming a hurricane by August the 5th before making landfall in Florida, and the storm's slow movement triggering intense rainfall, with some areas seeing 20 inches of rain. And I'm going to go ahead and restart that there for you. Over 20 inches of rain in some cases. Now, it did continue on up the East Coast after making a landfall almost in the same place where Hurricane Helene did later on in the year. We'll talk about Helene later on this week, but some of those tornadoes were quite strong and severe flooding, especially up in Quebec, where rainfall reached over 8.5 inches, especially there over the eastern part of Quebec. The storm leaving 10 dead and causing over $7 billion in damages. And speaking of Quebec, it suffered $2.5 billion in losses alone. It became that province's costliest disaster on record. So quite a hurricane there, Debby. And of course, the folks there in Florida and much of the southeast didn't have any clue that Hurricane Helene was going to be coming just a little over a month later. But this afternoon, we've got a lot of clear skies locally. I did want to point out a couple of features on the North American continent. You got a pretty broad area of low pressure that's here over the Great Lakes. Of course, you might have heard about the bomb cyclone off the west coast. I got 3 of my kids that live out in coastal Oregon. Now, they were blocked by some mountains, but they were telling me that the wind was pretty strong there on Tuesday night. They're a little bit north of where the main flow of that atmospheric river is. They're kind of right there in the southwestern corner of Oregon, right on the California state line. So they're getting a little relief from the rain, but they were kind of excited, being Louisiana kids. They did get some snow in the mountains and the foothills and a little bit of snow in the valley where they currently live. So kind of exciting for them to get that winter. They're going to be coming back for Christmas, though. I know they're looking forward to being back on the Gulf Coast. As far as our waves out in the Gulf of Mexico, things are still pretty rough out there. We had a small craft advisory for the far offshore waters that just expired, but the near shore waters are starting to calm down, and I think on Friday it might be a better day for boating. Maybe not in the open Gulf, but perhaps into Vermilion Bay and some of our inland waterways and lakes too. But look at all the clear skies that we've got here along the northern Gulf Coast, and you see that kind of pattern of cloud cover, that stratocumulus cloudiness that's there. That's an indication of that colder air diving well down toward the south. And if you look down here in Central America, remember the front that brought us all of the storms earlier in the week? Well, there it is right there. Now starting to move into northern Honduras. Unfortunately, Honduras getting some heavy rain associated with that front, on top of the tremendous rains that they got from Tropical Storm Sarah during the week last week. Kind of a broad area of low pressure is starting to develop here over western portions of the Caribbean Sea. How it interacts with this front is yet to be seen, but some of the models are still indicating maybe lowering of pressures and possibly a tropical system developing before hurricane season finally ends here on November the 30th. The rest of the Caribbean, though, is looking pretty good this time around. You've got a little shower activity in the northern Leeward Islands and some other activity there just north of Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, and then out in the middle part of the Atlantic Ocean. Not a whole lot going on. You got a couple of waves that are trying to work their way across the Atlantic Ocean, but as you get into the latter part of the season, a lot of times these get picked up by these stronger fronts that are moving across the Atlantic. So at this point, I don't expect anything to come from the Atlantic and move into the Caribbean. Anything that's going to develop over the next 10 days is going to be over the southwestern Caribbean, and then likely it will shoot off toward the northeast. I think North America, United States, much of Mexico is going to be probably finished with hurricane season now, although Cuba, the Bahamas, Jamaica, Dominican Republic, Haiti, and over toward Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands might need to still watch out here for another week and a half or so. The water temperatures over the Caribbean are quite warm. They're still warm enough to sustain a tropical system over the central and southern part of the Gulf of Mexico, but the waters are really starting to cool down, and the heat content is coming down quite a bit as well, especially over the Gulf and much of the western Atlantic. It's still on the high side there over the far western portion of the Caribbean and areas south of Jamaica and Haiti. So if we do get anything to try to develop in that particular area, not only are the warm waters there, but you got some high ocean heat content here over the western part of the Caribbean and into that Yucatan Channel as well. So if something were to develop, it might still be able to tap into some of that high ocean heat content and strengthen a little bit. But as far as another hurricane developing, that probably doesn't look likely. A tropical depression or maybe a tropical storm in the southwestern part of the Caribbean Sea. Wind shear, of course, is quite strong all across the Gulf and much of the western portions of the Atlantic, including the Bahamas. So anything that would try to move in this direction probably would be torn apart fairly quickly. That's why I'm thinking that the North American continent pretty much shutting down now when hurricane season comes to an end here. We do still have some light to moderate wind shear, though, over the central and western part of the Caribbean Sea out here. So possibly you could see some development. All of the ingredients are going to have to come together perfectly for something to get going there now over the southwestern Caribbean. The GFS still is indicating some low pressure kind of developing along that front. You see a little bit of a swirl there of energy and maybe a few peaks of a low kind of developing there. A lot more inconclusive compared to what we were looking at yesterday. The Euro model also shows the front kind of sagging its way down into the western part of the Caribbean. Perhaps a little swirl of energy there toward the end. Doesn't quite really develop a low. Maybe a little bit there off the Colombian coastline, but again, that is not very clear on anything. And there's another big front that kind of slides in there from 10 days from now there on the Euro model too. And the the Canadian model is showing a bit of a swirl of some increased moisture there off the Colombian and the Panamanian coast, but compared to yesterday, developing low pressure looks a lot less likely on that front compared to what we were seeing on some of the models over the past couple of days. Icon model only goes out 7 days, but it is showing a little bit of a broad low pressure area trying to develop there south of Jamaica and kind of northwest of Colombia. But again, inconclusive on that. At this point, it looks like the models are kind of backing off on any development, but it is something that we can just watch for the next couple of days as hurricane season officially will be ending in just 9 days. At least for the National Hurricane Center, they are not monitoring anything active at this point, nor do they expect any tropical cyclone activity over the next 7 days. And the global tropics hazard outlook is pretty much clear now going for the remainder of the hurricane season, going out to December the 10th. So occasionally you can get a post-season tropical system. It doesn't happen very often. You're more likely to get a preseason one during the month of May, but having systems develop during the month of December is really pretty unlikely. So as we're looking at the Thanksgiving week and then that first week in December, right now at this point it looks like hurricane season is generally done. And let's hope so, because this one became a pretty busy hurricane season after Beryl came in early. We got that bit of a break through the mid part of the summer. things really went crazy there starting in the mid part of September, and then we've just been on a constant barrage of tropical systems through October as well as November, ending with Sarah just a few days ago. I think it was Sunday when it finally, or Monday morning perhaps, the last advisory was issued on Sarah. And then, of course, some of the southeast getting some of the moisture from Sarah as that frontal boundary kind of passed on through. So hopefully we're done. Is there a possibility that we would get a Tony? I would say less than 20% chance on that now based on today's models, but we'll have to wait and see what tomorrow brings on Let's Talk Tropics. Of course, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel and turn on those notifications too. And don't forget, you can hear my forecast daily on Big 102.1, Planet Radio 106.7, and Freedom 95.1. And in between all of those forecasts, you can follow my social media pages both on Facebook and X. And those of you watching, please tell your friends about Acadiana Weather Today on YouTube. A little over 3,300 subscribers over the course of the last several months. And tell your friends to join too, because even though hurricane season is coming to an end, storm season doesn't really end here in Acadiana. We usually get kind of a severe weather window from November going into the early part of December. And then who knows, maybe we'll be talking about some winter-like weather finally here in Acadiana. I don't know about you, but I would kind of like to see a little bit of snow. That's a quick look at what we got going on here on Let's Talk Tropics. Don't forget you can catch Acadiana Weather Today tomorrow morning, sometime between 7 and 7:30.